Well, joining me now is Bettina Arndt. Bettina, thank you for your time. Victoria's Attorney-General, she wants the Governor-General to take away your order of Australia. Your response?
Just extraordinary. I think she's made an enormous mistake. I'm just being swamped with support, and people are absolutely outraged that she feels entitled to shut me down, to try to withdraw this honour I've received, simply because she doesn't agree with me. And it's a frightening indication of the arrogance of many of the people who are running our institutions, particularly the feminists, who think they're entitled to do this.
How does it feel, Bettina, to be the target of a real hate campaign? Because I assume, really, I don't think she thinks that you'll be stripped of your honour. I think this is a, punish you and scare others into silence. But being the target of all this hate and abuse, particularly on the ABC, do you wish now that you'd said no to the honour and not have this, give the haters this excuse to hate?
Oh no, I think it's absolutely wonderful, and they're playing into my hands, because they're absolutely proving how dangerous it is for the quiet Australians, the majority of people who don't want to live in a male-bashing culture, who want to see fair treatment for men and women, to be silent. I mean, to not dare speak out. We have to get active and start to talk about what's been going on here in a whole range of areas. I mean, one of the things that Hennessy said was that I was denying, I was denigrating victims and not talking about, their experiences properly. And of course, she never mentions male victims. She never mentions the third of victims of domestic violence who our official statistics show to be male. I mean, it is the feminists who are running many of our institutions who are denying the truth about issues like domestic violence.
And I think we've also, I've discussed with you, men who have been the victims of fake claims that have ruined their career without getting any chance of a fair process from whether, the students at a university or whatever. And I think these things need to be mentioned as well. Jill Hennessy and others, though, have singled out your interview with that pedophile 3 years ago to say you don't deserve the award. Do they have a point?
It's nonsense. For a start, they only show very select parts of that interview. I started that interview pointing out how serious this issue is, getting Bester to admit that he had committed a serious crime and deserved to go to prison. All that. I mean, there was one element that they're fixated on, which is being used to damage me, but the whole video, in fact, presented a much broader picture of this issue. And
so they're taking one quote, you say, from a longer video to damage you.
A whole lot of other issues. They're deliberately picking out bits that will be damaging out of context, misusing my words, twisting my words. This is a very deliberate campaign being run by activists involved in end rape on campus, because they realise I'm getting some runs on the board. I mean, I had some big successes last year in terms of exposing what's going on with our kangaroo courts at university. We had a major Supreme Court case in Queensland which ruled that universities should get out of the business of adjudicating rape. And of course, the activists are desperate to shut me up now. And it's just extraordinary how many people who have positions of power are choosing to comply with their desire to silence me.
Well, can you say they take your words, twist them and put them out of context. Can you give me the context for one thing you said on that video that does trouble me, and that is, remember this girl that this teacher abused was just 15, and you said, and I quote, "Here we have a case where evidence of the girl's sexually provocative behaviour was presented to the judge. The question that remains for me is whether there is any room in this conversation for talking to young people, particularly young girls, about behaving sensibly and not exploiting their seductive power to ruin the lives of men." Yeah. Now, that sounds to me like you blaming a 15-year-old girl for ruining her abuser's life. I don't like that. Do you regret saying it?
Look, the only thing I regret was the context in which I said that. I mean, I have spoken out on many occasions about the problems we have attracting male teachers, the fact that male teachers know they can be easily subject to false accusations from women, or have their, once again, have things that they've done in terms of the way they've dealt with their class or whatever, used and twisted out of context. I talked to a teacher last year who had patted a girl on the back with his baton. He was a music conductor in the school, and she accused him of sexual abuse, and there were witnesses to support exactly what actually occurred in relation to that incident. And
Bettina, I take your wider point. I take your wider point, absolutely. But the first part of that quote related specifically to this 15-year-old girl. Here we have a case where evidence of the girl's sexually provocative behaviour was presented to the judge. That you can't turn this on a 15-year-old girl.
But look, obviously the issue is the adult, the teacher, is always responsible for any sexual activity that goes on between a child and an adult. There's no question about that, as I made very clear in that interview. But this was part of that case. The fact that the girl's behaviour was discussed as part of the evidence presented there, and I should not have included that in the broader discussion in that interview. I've admitted that. That is the only aspect of that interview I regret. I think it's extremely, it's really important we talk about these very complex issues, such as I've said, what's happening to male teachers in schools. And I should have done that in a separate interview rather than in that context.
Agreed there. But this is just one interview in a very long career of writing and speaking, and sometimes under huge scrutiny and pressure. And we all say things at times that we regret. I mean, Jill Hennessy herself, the Attorney-General, I'm sure, regrets, for instance, having once called her own Deputy Premier the C word, and she wouldn't want her career to be judged exclusively on that. What is the real message in your career that you have tried to convey, that you think you've been honoured for, and that the feminists, radical feminists, do not like?
Look, as the citation said, I'm promoting gender equity, which is supposed to mean fair treatment for men and women. And that is what I have done all my life, tried to get a level playing field where neither sex, neither gender is unfairly advantaged at the expense of the other. And I think feminism has absolutely gone off the rails in promoting unfair treatment, where women are advantaged ahead of men and men are often discriminated against, and that is what I'm fighting. And what's been wonderful about this whole fracas is the number of people who are contacting me now to come on board and say, what can I do? So please go to my website and you can contact me and help me with my various campaigns to achieve fair treatment for boys and for men.
Bettina Arndt, thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thank you, Andrew.